Looks like several of you are typing. This is wonderful. We apologize sincerely for our technical difficulties, but we are going to move forward from this point. Again, we are here today for Kentucky 1792. Our presenter today is Walt Bowman. He is the supervisor in the Archives Research Room, and he is going to be discussing a lot of the neat things related to Kentucky around statehood. Also with us today is Derek Clark, one of the archivists in the Archives Research Room, and he is going to be taking care of the chat pod today. Any questions for Walt? Feel free to go ahead and type those in the chat box. Any technical issues, which I hope to goodness we don't have any more. I think we've had our fair share this morning. Go ahead and type those in the chat box as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move forward, and I'll turn it on over to Walt.
Good morning, folks. Thank you all again for your patience. And now I think we've got our slide driving ability and our microphone abilities cleared up, so we'll try this again. We'll go back to the picture of Governor Isaac Shelby. This is Governor Isaac Shelby. He is the governor of the state, of course, in two separate occasions, from 1792 to 1796. He is our first governor, and he's also governor again from 1812 to 1816. So actually the first official Kentucky state records we have are for Governor Shelby and his executive journal. Shelby, of course, is a hero of both the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. Kentucky, of course, obviously is a part of Virginia prior to statehood. This is the Act of Separation. This is actually a plaque we have in the research room here at the archives. It hangs on the wall in a prominent place. It shows Virginia and creating the Act of Separation in December of 1789, allowing Kentucky to become a state. Kentucky cannot become a state prior to 1789 because the Constitution of the United States is not ratified till that year. The Constitutional Convention meets in 1787, and ratification goes on through that year, 1788, and by the spring of 1789, the United States is in existence as a country. So the state of Virginia can now release Kentucky to become a state on her own. There are some frustrations in terms of indebtedness for defense of the frontier by Virginia for Kentucky, that once that's resolved, Kentucky is free to seat a government in June of 1792. We're going to look at a couple of different types of records. We're going to look at some state records and some county clerk records. And these also have value in terms of research and genealogy, but they also are of value to academic researchers. This is the act of the Kentucky General Assembly for 1792. It actually is the creation of Clark County. Kentucky grew exponentially once following 1789 with the ability to become a state. In 1792, the population of Kentucky, which had been 73,000 people in 1790, is over 100,000 people on the first tax list census of 1792. So that between the years 1792 and 1794, 7 new counties are formed. So there's about 8 counties in the state prior to statehood, but almost immediately a number of new counties are formed. Those will include Clark, Washington, several others. Franklin comes in 94. So you see a wealth of counties coming in with the creation of statehood. This is a 1787 Fayette County, Kentucky tax list. Prior to 1786, the state of Virginia operated on an old tithable tax system, which was a holdover from the Church of England tithable tax system. That generally just showed you the head of household or any male in the household chargeable with that tax. So what you'll see, the first 2 columns there, the first column is going to be your head of household. The second column is going to be anybody in that household who would be, and again, it's just males over the age of 21. So you're going to see any kinsman in that household who's living there with the head, or anybody in the household who's 21 who has not left home. You don't get a lot more information outside of livestock on that 1787 Fayette County tax list. Because of frustrations with land in the state, land grants and overlapping surveys and things of that nature, by 1794, the state passes a very new land law. And what you get is you get land rated for tax purposes. You also get a water course on which the land lies, and you get information such as in whose name the land was initially surveyed, and you also get a breakdown of the taxable males in the house by age. So you get males over 16, those over 21. If we look back at the names of those being charged with a tax, the next 3 columns over are actually rates of land. So there's first rate, second rate, and third rate land. First rate land is bottom land, usually used for tilling or actual farming, crop agriculture. The second rate land is usually going to be kind of steep and rolling. You're going to pasture that land as a general rule. And third rate land is going to be too rocky either to do either with, or it's going to be heavily timbered. So you're charged your rate. You'll see the acreage down below in those columns as to what type of land you have by what acreage. The next column over is watercourses. And this is something fairly valuable to you if you're looking to get a general idea of where your ancestor lived in a particular county. So they really wanted to, because of the frustrations with land records, again, at the dawn of statehood, they put this who's surveyed in the watercourse in there, but now, 200 and some years later, we have the ability to go back and look and see if your ancestor lived on Bracken Creek or Lawrence Creek, or where they lived at the time of that 1796 tax. This is a Franklin County stray book. I hope this slide would be a little bigger. It's not. You're going to be looking at the very middle section of that. What happened is, again, during the Virginia system, back in the old Church of England, stray livestock that were found, a notice was put on the church door, beside the church door, each time the church was held. So if for some reason church was missed that Sunday, the notice didn't go up, but the notice would go on the church door every time church met, saying who you were, what livestock you had found, and you could go retrieve that livestock from the person who had it, and there was generally a fee involved. After statehood, or actually in the late Virginia days as well, you would see stray books. And stray books are simply someone says, I've taken up an animal, and again, if you have handouts of this, or you can enlarge that, you'll be able to see a William White who has found a roan mare on Elkhorn Creek. And Mr. White is going to take that mare down to the county clerk's office, tell them he has found her. He's basically going to give them a fee and says, okay, I'm going to keep this mare. You could take the mare home with you. You could keep her. You could use her. You couldn't harm her. You couldn't damage her. If you damaged her, you're liable for her. And then when the owner of the animal came back, he would have to go to the county clerk and pay basically the stray fee for having lost this livestock, and then he'd go claim the animal from you, and you would get your money back. So just a way of making sure, that if you lost an animal, even though you were basically a fine for it, you had a way of finding your animal and getting it back. You would go down to the county clerk's office and check the county stray book. The next slide we have is and the same was true, interestingly enough, of boats. This is a Gallatin County 1790, mid-1790s, 1799 actually, stray book for boats on the rivers, on the watercourses, certainly on the Ohio River and on the Kentucky River. You will see vessels that have broken loose either in high water or just for whatever reason left their moorings and came down the river and came ashore. You can see here in this Gallatin County stray book, we have a well-described flat bottom boat, 20 by 20 with ash gunnels, and she was taken up in the mouth of the river, on the mouth of the Kentucky River at the confluence of the Ohio. So one of the problems here is not only does the vessel possibly have broken loose from her moorings, the Ohio Valley, as we know from the 1740s, was a military frontier. First between the English and French, and then later on between, for a period of time in the Revolution, between the British possessions north of the river and the colonies, and then eventually a military frontier between the Indians in the old Northwest Territories and Kentucky and the neighboring areas of Virginia. So it's conceivable that the occupants of the boats coming down the river were sometimes lured ashore on the northern bank and massacred, or oftentimes they might just be put in for the night and camp there and be massacred. So it's possible the crew of this vessel may have been lost by other means. But the stray boat worked just like the stray book did. You went down to the courthouse, you told them you had found this boat, you made this entry into the stray book, and theoretically the owner of the boat would come up and do the same transaction as occurred with the mare. Generally, if the boat came far enough upstream, there would be nobody claiming her. Oftentimes you would wind up keeping the boat, either breaking her down or you put pressure on her to use for your own needs. All right. Eventually, Kentucky will get its first newspaper in 1787. That's the Kentucky Gazette in Lexington. And at that point, you can see in the second column there on the newspaper, you're actually going to get now the strays are posted in the newspaper. So you can actually go in, and when you pick up your weekly newspaper, you can look in there and see if indeed an animal, a description of one you have lost, is going to be there being listed down at the county clerk's office. So you can go down and engage in the process of getting that animal back. This is, of course, from 1792. Actually, it is the early part of 1792, in the spring of 1792. It's only about 5 years in. Again, Kentucky gets a newspaper 5 years before statehood. Okay, jumping back to commerce, there's changes being made. Virginia law translates, some of it translates to the West, some of it does not. And one of the things that translated in Virginia law is this is an act of the General Assembly talks about navigation. And there was a law in Virginia that to prevent slaves from escaping because the best way to escape obviously is in a sailing vessel or a vessel of some kind. If you can get out in the ocean, there are even as early as the 1780s some colonies that do not practice slavery to the degree the southern colonies do. Is that a boat going out underway could not have more than 1/3 of her crew be slaves. So that actually translated then to the western waters. When the law came, along, initially it translated to the western waters, and that will at some point finally go away. But generally, those waters running the Ohio, the Kentucky, the waters of Sandy, air waters, at one time you could not have a slave crew manning a vessel because theoretically you could lose both the slaves and the vessel. As we talked about, the Ohio River was a military frontier separating the parts of the Indian Hill, Old Northwest, and Kentucky and Virginia. And so there were actually a great danger in traveling the Ohio prior to 1794 and 1795. This is an ad, again, that ran in the Kentucky Gazette that talks about somebody who's willing to convoy, basically, to travel up and down the river and make sure that your boat is safe. It's actually going to be an armed collection of passengers, or it could be an armed boat that will carry passengers. And the hope is that commerce and navigation will not be impugned up and down the river because of the threat of Indian attack. Because, again, there are no aids to navigation at that point. You generally do not travel continuously on the boat during the course of the night. Obviously, there's no buoy markers, there's no lights, there's no day boards, there's nothing that you know of the dangers of the river, of logs or sandbars or whatever may be the navigational hazards on the river. So you need to put in at night and then go and start again in the morning. And theoretically, you're able to put in on the southern bank. If you are not able to do that and you wind up putting in on the northern bank, then there's a possibility you could be attacked and killed if you're not well armed and aware of the situation. So obviously we talked about the fact that navigation is very important in Kentucky at that time period because we have a lack of roads. The next slide is a Garrett County road order. So what we have either county order books or just plain road order books that are going to have individuals charged with either creating roads or maintaining them. So what you will see here, this is actually a road running from the courthouse in Garrett County in Lancaster to the courthouse in Madison County. And you kind of read through that later on. Third line down talks about the courthouse going to the Madison County courthouse from the courthouse in Garrett County. So what would happen is, you would lay the road off, and then the county would actually pay somebody to actually first create the road and then later to maintain it. And the maintenance was rolling, so you didn't always have the same person maintaining the road. So and you maintain sections of road, so you can kind of get an idea, again, where your ancestor lived if you're looking at road orders, because oftentimes you will get not a good description, but a vague description of what section of road who is tasked with maintaining. So if you think your ancestor at some point had, been involved in maintaining a section of road, at least you have a vague notion of, some 5 or 6 mile stretch of road that he may have lived on. This actually is from Garrett County from 1797. This is a court of appeals in that this is, again, there's land disputes we talked about at great length. This is the March term of 1792, and you can see a diagram of some surveys there. As early as 1783, the state of Virginia actually had to create a separate component to its Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of Virginia District of Kentucky, that would actually oversee land cases, because there were surveys done in the state as early as 1793. And those are actually 1773, sorry. And those were done up until the time of the Revolution. Many people left the state during the Revolution because of the war and did not come back after 1779. when the land office was created, and Clark wins the two battles in the Old Northwest. So that oftentimes people would come back, and one tract of land had been claimed by somebody who hadn't come back or had been surveyed poorly by that person. So there are many instances of people in the 1780s winding up in very conflicting land disputes with people who had been here in the 1770s. The surveyor was not always 1,000% on his surveys, so sometimes you had overlapping or shingled surveys. So again, land disputes were a huge part of the state for probably the first years of statehood. And again, this is a published volume. The Court of Appeals cases are published all the way back into the 1783 when that first court sat, and you can see select cases in there and the results of those for those land cases. I will quick glance back at the road improvements. As you know, the Cumberland Road being one of those, the road from Cumberland Gap being one of those roads that had to be improved. There were also roads that ran down, as you know, from Maysville to Lexington. So about this time period, and certainly after 1796, when both the tribes in East Tennessee and the tribes north of the Ohio are eventually defeated, the road orders become far more important because you have a lot more roads being maintained and a lot more travel on those roads. This is a letter from to Governor Shelby thanking him for his diligence. Last lines there, the violence of the previous march for the Indians and last spring against the frontier. Basically, up until 1794, the state had a hard time defending its frontier against the Indians. There is a number of campaigns. The federal government undertakes two, one in 1789 and one in 1791. Under Harmer and Arthur St. Clair. Both of these meet with crushing defeats. And so well until the spring of 1794, the North American Indians were able to raid south of the Ohio River. The summer of 1793, actually, the Morgan Station in what is now Montgomery County was attacked, and the entire populace either captured or killed. That was probably the last major raid in the state. So that by the spring of 1794, the federal government has begun to plan a major campaign against the Indians north of the Ohio, and Kentucky will be a huge contributor in that. Kentucky will deploy actually 2 cavalry regiments in support of that. This is Charles R. Scott's cavalry division in the War for the Old Northwest. Charles R. Scott will go on to be a Kentucky governor in the early 19th century. Scott is a veteran of the French and Indian War. He also served as a regimental commander and brigade commander in the American Revolution. And Scott takes actual brigades, several cavalry regiments, north in the campaign for the Old Northwest, and eventually plays a major part in scouting for Anthony Wayne's army that wins the major victory at Fallen Timbers in the August of 1794, which basically ends large Indian raids in eastern Kentucky and the central bluegrass, or maybe a few in the far west. But this win in 1794 is very important because it also frees up the Ohio River for navigation. So that navigation we talked about that was sometimes impugned and actually delayed because of threat of Indian attack. The win at Fallen Timbers in 1794 is a factor in that. This is a copy off a roll of microfilm. So what we have is the muster roll listings for those individuals that served with Charles R. Scott's cavalry formation in the War for the Old Northwest in 1794 and 95. This is a picture of the precursor to Fallen Timbers. You can see the Kentucky militiamen there. This is from a National Guard Association prints in the right foreground there, and going on over back to the right-hand side of the picture, the mounted Kentucky militiamen of Scott's command, and then also there in formation are troops of Anthony Wayne's Legion, as it were. And this is probably right about the time of the Battle of Fallen Timbers in August of 1794. Okay, so the victory of 1794 actually is sealed by the Treaty of Greenville in Ohio in December 1795. That means that the North American Indians will actually give up about a half of what we now know as Ohio. And again, that will cause the raids to cease. It will also cease the interruption of navigation on the Ohio River, to kind of repeat myself. And the world begins to change exponentially at that point. For those of you who recognize the structure, this is Whitehall in Madison County. It is one of the early brick structures. William Whitley has a brick structure built in 1787. But after 1792, certainly in that time period, we get to see a lot more almost like the manor-like structures like this one that will be familiar with us as time goes on here in the Bluegrass. This is a series of things I put on here just to give you an idea of how much the state does grow after statehood. In that you'll see now we have advertisements. This is again from the 1790s. We have advertisements in the Lexington, Kentucky Gazette, in the Lexington paper for mercantile goings and comings. You see over here you have dry goods, glassware, things of that nature coming in, and you also have taverns that, obviously you might not be able to have those years ago in the first 5 years after statehood. This is an inspection station. So by 1795, commerce has increased to the point that you're going to have the ability to hogshead. Tobacco is the best form of trade here that actually serves as money in fines and court cases and things of that nature. And so what would happen is there was a state inspection station that made sure the tobacco you were selling met the right weight of a hogshead and also was in good quality. And this is actually for an inspection station. This is from the Acts of General Assembly. This is for an inspection station that's set in southern Fayette County, down on the end of Cleveland Road there. There's also, you can see other ones named as well, what counties they were in, where the inspection stations were located. Just to step back a second to the Treaty of Greenville, the thoroughbred industry came to us in the 1790s. It's very hard to have a thoroughbred industry when there's a likelihood your horses will be killed on a fairly regular basis. So we get the thoroughbred industry. Elisha Warfield, the very famous horse breeder, comes to us at that point. By 1796, Lexington has a population of over 1,000 and has a 400-volume library in it at that point. So I'm just looking at a tax list for 1792. That newly formed Washington County I mentioned early on in the presentation already has over 2,000 head of stock being pastured in it by the just after 1792. So the state changes exponentially once the commerce starts down the Ohio River, once the threat of Indian attacks goes away, and all this is accomplished basically in Governor Shelby's administration or in the first 5 years after statehood. And we start to get those great structures, as you saw, the Whitehall and some of the structures here in Frankfort are built in the 1790s. As a general rule, probably the number of brick structures in the state absolutely doubles in the decades from 1792 to 1800. Of course, commerce travel down the Ohio Mississippi River comes with its own drawbacks. There's any number of drawbacks to that. This is something I wanted to include. I found this a couple of days ago. This is the second item down there, an act concerning the marriage of Margaret Richardson. Before 1849, the Committee on Religion in the legislature signed off on all divorces. So if you're looking for a divorce prior to 1849 for your ancestor, you can actually look in the Acts of General Assembly and see the divorce taking place. Now, here's what's happened is this lady is living in rural Fayette County in 1795, and her husband has gone to New Orleans, we assume. He may have gone to St. Louis. It just says he's left her to become a Spanish subject. So this now enables her to file for divorce in any county in the state because the husband has, now that, there's far less danger on travel than there was, let's say, before 1794 and 95. He has gone off to be a Spanish subject and kind of left her there. So he might have stayed at home had this been, the years earlier than that. This is a picture, of course, of navigation. This comes from the flood wall in Maysville in Mason County, and it's a picture of basically what you're going to see now that the state has moved into statehood. It's controlling its own affairs. It has the ability to trade on the waterways, the Ohio and down the Mississippi River. It also has the ability to grow with the idea that there's not going to be Indian attacks and things of that nature. Just as we look at this picture, so within 10 years of statehood, the state is now the home of James Wilkinson, John Holder, and Elisha Warfield. James Wilkinson is a Revolutionary War officer who comes to Kentucky and makes a fortune in keelboat navigation. He actually will go on to he will die a Spanish citizen. He will wind up he actually lobbied for Kentucky to go part of Spain during that time period. John Holder is a very famous keelboat magnate who had a keelboat yard at the mouth of, actually above the mouth of below the mouth of the Red River on the Kentucky River in what is now Clark County. And that he did very well for a number of years there in that industry until, of course, steam navigation took over. And of course, Elisha Warfield, I mentioned, is one of the early horse breeders in Lexington and helps to bring the thoroughbred industry into the state after the mid-1790s. Just a aside on that, there's a letter in the Draper papers. Lyman Draper, of course, went through 19th century America collecting documents from the pioneers. And there's a letter in the Draper papers that Boone is writing to a fur trader in Baltimore. And he's simply saying, we can no longer commercially hunt. So to commercially hunt, obviously you have to be able to go out and kill tens of animals, be it buffaloes or bears or whatever you're killing. And he actually says in this letter from probably 98 or 99 that he simply has had to leave eastern Kentucky. He's tried hunting and trapping on the Big Sandy and Kanawha, but that's not going well either. So within a couple of years, Boone's actually going to leave the state because settlement has become such. I mean, you can still go out and kill if you need a deer to eat, or you can kill a bear. There's plenty of those to be killed, but you just can't go out all day and kill them by the dozens as a commercial trapper or hunter. And so obviously that has changed in terms of what you're able to accomplish, what would have been the deal or the scenario probably only 10 years before. The state by 1800 has reached a population of 200,000 people. So the population has absolutely doubled. And so from that point forward, things change pretty exponentially in terms of our growth as a state and a major component in the nation. I'm going to leave us with end with that slide there of starting to grow and become. I think this actually again is Maysville, which will grow to be a major river port, as will some other folks along the river, Carrollton and some other places as well. So I'll leave us some time for questions now.
Thank you, Walt. We appreciate everyone's patience again today as we work through our technical difficulties. This webinar was made part and possible by the Institute for Museum and Library Services. Wanted to make you aware of that, as well as Save the Day. We have several wonderful trainings coming up. Don't forget to visit our CE calendar to take a look at those events. There's a few of them listed that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. This webinar, again, will be recorded and posted on our archived webinars page within 1 week. We have also added here to the left of the chat pod, you will see here a new box that says survey link. We very much need your response for our continued IMLS funding. If you click on the wording Kentucky 1792 survey link, then there is the Browse To button at the bottom. That will bring up the survey link for you right here and now, and you can go ahead and complete that survey. We have shrunk our surveys recently. It's only 5 questions long, and again, we appreciate that feedback. Don't forget to follow us in the CE section on social media, as well as the Kentucky State Archives. You can also find them on Twitter and Facebook as well. Lots of fun things going on there on all of our social media sources. The handout is also available again in the downloads pod. If you haven't already downloaded it, you can download a copy there and have that for your records. And your certificate of attendance will be emailed out to you in 1 week. As Walt said, we're going to hang out for another few minutes. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. And we appreciate you taking time to join us today. Thanks, everyone.